This is a 1960s dresser and pair of nightstands by Drexel. I love the quality of this vintage brand, but unfortunately, these pieces are in a pretty sad state. I don't know if they spent too much time in storage or maybe they just changed hands too many times, but the bases are shot and they're just filthy. Today's video, I'm going to show you how I updated these pieces with new hardwood bases and how I updated the cabinet doors. I'm also going to restore the tops to the natural wood and then refinish everything else in a neutral paint color. I'm Amy. I build and revive furniture, often adding something new to something old. I'm sharing tips, tricks, and methods on how to give old pieces a new lease on life. Welcome to my shop. This dresser is massive. It's 80 inches long. That's more than 6.5 feet. And everything is made of solid wood. The carcass, all 9 drawers. That means that the new base I build has to be extremely solid to support not only the weight of the dresser, but the weight of all the stuff someone's going to put in it once it finds a new home. So yeah, this is going to be a lot of work, but I know the potential that exists here. Why? Because I've refinished this exact same dresser before. And it turned out looking gorgeous. No, I'm not going to show it to you because that'll ruin the ending. If you insist on cheating, I'll put a link below. Also, I've worked on vintage Drexel pieces before and the quality is just excellent. Actually, there was a nightstand I had to reconstruct. Well, that's another story. I'll link that below too. So my first step was to visit my favorite lumber store. This is Anderson Lumber in St. Petersburg, Florida. They've been a family-owned business since 1908 and I love going here. They helped me pick out about 40 linear feet of ash. It's a dense and durable hardwood. Ash is used for everything from staircases to timber frames, baseball bats to tool handles. And it has a pretty nice grain pattern. These pieces are 1.5 inches thick and they already have a nice round over edge profile on them. Back at my shop, I started removing the old bases. I didn't film it, but I did give these pieces a thorough vacuuming and cleaning, first with Crud Cutter, then warm water. And yeah, they were filthy. I must have changed my bucket of water at least a dozen times. I did preliminary measurements to determine how much lumber I was going to need, but now that the bases are off, I'm dialing in the precise measurements. So the base is really important. It needs to be able to support a lot of weight. Now, I see a lot of people that put, one piece across and then they, do a leg here and a leg on the other side. This dresser is way too long for that. It needs more support. So let me show you what I'm going to do to make sure that this is going to look really nice, but it's also going to be able to support the weight. I'm going to add 2 additional legs on the front on either side of the cabinet doors, and I'll add 1 more in the back. And then I will also do some support pieces going across. Here and down here at the end. The legs are going to be 5.5 inches high. It's really easy to get pieces confused, so after I cut all the pieces to length, I started marking them to stay organized. Each leg is going to get an inside taper, so I'm marking my left and right legs because I want the prettiest side facing forward. And again, it's really easy to get confused when I'm batch cutting these on the table saw. And before I start cutting the legs I've carefully organized and marked, I'm using a scrap piece to make sure I like the angle of the taper. And yes, I do taper the back legs too. Even though the taper is on the inside, I do think it's somewhat visible, so it's definitely worth the extra effort. It's important that the legs are all the exact same length so the furniture sits even. So I'm going back and trimming to final length using my miter gauge and a stop block. In my shop, with the tools I have, this is the most accurate, consistent cut I can get. Last step for the legs is to add a round over edge profile to the tapered edges I just cut. I'm assembling the bases using pocket holes, strong hardwood screws, and glue. When you're using hardwood, I recommend using screws specifically designed for hardwoods. If you've ever tried to drive a regular screw into hardwood like oak or maple or ash, you've probably either broken the screw or cracked the wood. Also, it's really important to use clamping pressure. If you don't, it's very likely your pieces will move out of alignment when you're driving the screws. And when I said you need clamping pressure when you're driving the screws, that's also true when your piece is inconveniently 6.5 feet long. So here I'm using what are called pipe clamps. You can buy the clamp ends separately, then just use regular metal pipes to create a very long clamp. I'm using glue, hardwood screws, and clamps to attach the base to the dresser. Because the nightstand bases are smaller and easier to install, I'm going to wait to attach those until after the furniture is all painted. I wanted to give the cabinet doors an update too, so I removed the screws that held the panels in place. Ugh, it was so dusty. I don't hate this look, but with the new bases, I thought that something a little more modern would look better. The lattice work was attached with small staples, so they came out pretty easily with just a few taps from my mallet. I'm going to use the existing back panels, but I'm going to attach an updated pattern to them. So I'm using 1/2-inch thick oak planks cut to about 1 inch wide. Then I cut 45-degree angles on each end. Then I added a small chamfer edge to each side. I'm replacing the hardware, so I'm using Bondo to fill the old holes. Bondo is a 2-part wood filler that dries very hard and quickly. It's a great solution if you're painting a surface. Don't forget to wear a mask or a respirator. It has a pretty toxic smell. I overfill the holes, then I go back after it dries and sand smooth. You can see the cleaning removed a lot of the old finish, but the surface still needs to be sanded. And I always drill the new hardware holes before painting. Here I'm using a very simple reusable template I made out of 1/4-inch plywood. After 3 primer coats, I reinstalled the panels in the cabinet doors and went on to 3 coats of paint, which I didn't film. Sorry. I liked the color of the wood tops, but they didn't match the new bases very well. Also, you can see here the top is a different wood than the edges. And this is pretty typical, even with what's considered higher-end vintage furniture. Typically, they would use a very pretty wood veneer on the top, and they'd install that veneer over a less expensive hardwood. In this case, it looks like poplar. And when all the old dark finish was removed, you can see it doesn't match. So after giving everything a final sanding with 220 grit, I'm going to use a paint wash to bring all those different colors back together. After the paint wash was completely dry, I applied 4 coats of General Finishes satin polyurethane with my HVLP sprayer. I usually give the tops a light final sand with 400 grit sandpaper, but they were already so smooth I didn't even need to. So, let's take a moment to remember where we started. And here's how it looks now. And the most dangerous question to ask on YouTube, what do you think? I'm already working on another project, so make sure to like and subscribe so you can see what's next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.